Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Madam President, High Commissioner for Human Rights, Excellencies and distinguished delegates. First, I congratulate you, Madam President, and members of the Bureau for assuming stewardship of this Council. I must also commend High Commissioner Bachelet and her office for their global human rights advocacy. This Council is the custodian of universal human rights. It has made strides towards amplifying and responding to the aspirations of the people across the world. Sadly, though, at times it remains a helpless bystander to abuse and impunity. The Council's enduring strength lies, as the Secretary General also stated yesterday, in an even-handed approach and in its transparency and impartiality. Madam President, as a founding member, Pakistan has and will continue to positively contribute to all the processes and mechanisms of the Council. Despite suffering the scourge of terrorism and regional security challenges, our resolve to safeguard and advance human dignity and rights remains unwavering. In line with our founder, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision of a humane and egalitarian state, we have enacted laws that are progressive to protect children, women, minorities, the transgender community, the differently abled and other marginalized segments. Last year, we opened up the Kartarpur corridor and constructed the world's largest Gurdwara, allowing unimpeded access to the Sikh community from across the world. In Pakistan, 18 denominations of Christian churches are present, where devotees freely profess their religion. We also have a flourishing Christian missionary school system. There is, of course, room for improvement, but I assure you that Pakistan is continuing down this road, including in providing our minorities with their own personal laws. We are also countering hate speech through legal and administrative means. We have pioneered now a wide-ranging social protection program entitled Ehsaas or Compassion, aimed at alleviating the plight of the marginalized through financial empowerment of women, provision of shelters to the homeless, and through removal of financial barriers to accessing health and education. Madam President, Pakistan in September 2019 presented a plea and a petition of the Kashmiri people to this Council. Meanwhile, over 6 months have passed and 8 million Kashmiris, already in the clutches of decades-long Indian oppression, state oppression, remain caged in the world's largest open prison. The physical and digital lockdown continues in violation of international human rights standards endorsed and pursued by this very Council. Empowered by draconian laws and in contravention of all international laws, Indian security forces continue to operate with impunity, violating the fundamental rights and freedoms of the Kashmiri people. This has grossly affected their ability to earn, get access to hospital, attend schools and practice their faith, with the Srinagar's largest mosque remaining closed since August last year. Women, girls and youth are being targeted by Indian security forces, with rape being used as a tool of oppression in violation of several UN Security Council resolutions, most specifically Resolution 1325. Despite the media clampdown in occupied Kashmir, reports of harassment and beatings of journalists are rife. Human rights defenders face similar obstacles in their work, and reprisals against them are increasing. Immediately after August 5th last year, over 6,000 Kashmiris, political leaders, activists, students, professionals and youth were arrested without due process of law. Many of them were forcibly shipped to jails all over India, and the fate of most of them still remains unknown. Those released have been forced to sign a pledge of silence. The facade of normalcy projected through the state-controlled narrative and orchestrated visits of hand-picked foreigners are designed to mislead the international community. Several civil society and media reports have exposed these false claims, as no independent observer, journalist or even Indian opposition leaders have been allowed to visit Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Madam President, Pakistan is not alone in highlighting the true face of India's deliberate disregard of human dignity, as well as its blatant breach of its international human rights obligations. The US Congress, EU parliamentarians, the UN Secretary General, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as human rights organizations and the international media have all highlighted the same. Amnesty International has rightly termed India as the internet shutdown capital of the world, end quote. Of course, I don't need to remind the Council that all this represents clear breaches and multiple international human rights instruments that India is a party to. Further, it exposes the real mindset of a regime that pretends to be the bastion of democracy, federalism and secularism, and aspires also to be a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Unfortunately, India is attempting to buy political support and silence critics on its systematic rights abuses in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and of Muslims in India, as we witnessed yesterday during the Trump visit to India through offers of lucrative arms and other business deals. Madam President, at the root of this state-led oppression is India's refusal to grant the people of Jammu and Kashmir their inalienable right to self-determination. India's unilateral actions of 5th August 2019 aimed at altering the demographics of occupied Jammu and Kashmir are illegal under international law and constitute a willful violation of several UN Security Council resolutions. India's assertion that these actions are its internal affair have no credibility, particularly in light of UN Security Council resolutions that deem the territory in question to be occupied. The Security Council has met twice since 5th August 2019, debunking the mantra of Jammu and Kashmir being India's so-called internal matter. What is happening in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is not a country-specific situation in this Council's parlance. The atrocities and abuses are being inflicted upon the people of a disputed and occupied territory. Jammu and Kashmir has been on the UN Security Council agenda for over 70 years, marked as disputed in all maps of the UN. The situation in this occupied territory must therefore be of direct international concern. It is not and can never be an internal matter of India. Madam President, the Human Rights Council must pay immediate attention to the protection and respect of the human rights of the people of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The inaction of the international community and this Council will only serve to embolden India to commit more atrocities and with impunity while endangering regional peace and security. In fact, to divert attention from its illegal actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the current Indian political leadership is threatening war against Pakistan. The possibility of a false flag operation remains a serious concern for my country, Pakistan. The Human Rights Council has for its consideration the 2 Kashmir reports by the High Commissioner's Office. It also has recourse to a joint statement on Jammu and Kashmir endorsed by more than 50 member states during the 42nd Council session last September. The 2 reports of the High Commissioner's Office make a clear recommendation to this Council to constitute an independent commission of inquiry to investigate and report human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir. I reiterate Pakistan's endorsement of this recommendation. If India has nothing to hide, it should allow unhindered access to the Commission of Inquiry and independent observers. Pakistan stands ready to allow access on its side of the line of control, together with similar access to the Indian-occupied site. We also urge the High Commissioner to continue with the reporting process on Jammu and Kashmir. This Council and the wider international community must act and demand from India with the following with respect to Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. 1. rescind all illegal actions of 5th August 2019. 2. Immediately desist from changing the demographics in the occupied territory. 3. Lift the lockdown and communications blackout. 4. Allow access to medicines, food and other essential items for the Kashmiri people. 5. Release all arbitrarily arrested Kashmiri leaders, professionals and activists, including young minor boys who have been abducted by the Indian security forces. 6. Repeal all draconian laws which allow Indian occupation forces to continue committing atrocities with impunity. 7. Prohibit the use of force by India, specifically the use of live ammunition and pellet guns against unarmed civilians, including children. And lastly, ensure drawdown of its over 800,000 troops that are currently holding the entire Kashmiri population under siege through brute illegal force. In conclusion, Pakistan hopes this Council will deliver on its promise and its principles. Let the world not forget the disastrous legacy of the Munich appeasement and the great cost of it, not only to Europe, but the world at large. Let us not repeat the same mistake all over again. I thank you.